It's absolutely terrifying. A 3-meter thick reinforced concrete wall is being chewed up like a little cookie. Right now, I'm lying flat on my face in the muddy ground, with dust and dirt raining down on my head, and I can barely keep my eyes open. Directly in front of me, that blast wall that usually stands as solid as a mountain is now shaking violently. The sound it makes is bizarre, a creaking, grinding noise, like a toothless old man desperately gnawing on a hard bone. Huge chunks of cement are falling off the wall, hitting the ground with heavy thuds. I see a steel bar as thick as a thigh, originally embedded deep in the wall, now twisting like a noodle. It's caught by whatever's inside that hole, and right before my eyes, that steel bar is twisted into a spiral until it snaps with a sharp crack. The air is thick with choking lime dust, mixed with the foul stench of dead fish. I rub my eyes and see a massive, grayish-white thing poking out of the hole in the wall. It's disgustingly grotesque, spinning constantly, covered in sticky slime. Its size is horrifying, just its head is wider than our Humvee. My ears are filled with the screeching sound of metal grinding against metal, piercing and unbearable, like someone is sawing through my skull with a steel blade. The vibration makes my eyeballs ache, and everything looks double. My comrade beside me is shouting something, but I can't hear a thing. I can only see his mouth moving frantically. That grayish-white drill head keeps pushing inward. With every rotation, a huge chunk of that thick wall disappears. Fragments of rock fly everywhere, some hitting my helmet with a clang. I look down at my hands and see the ground itself is trembling, the vibration traveling from the soles of my feet all the way to the back of my head. This thing is still moving. It shows no sign of stopping. At the center of that massive rotating head is a pitch black hole, lined with pale, gleaming blades spinning so fast they turn everything they touch into powder. I watch the powder spray out of the hole like a fountain, covering the muddy ground. I'm staring fixedly at that hole in the wall, my palms drenched in cold sweat. That creaking, grinding sound is getting closer, and the cracks in the wall are almost at my feet. I try to scoot backward, but my legs are as weak as noodles. That huge, slimy monster is slowly squeezing its head into our base. Every inch it advances, the cracks in the ground follow. There's no escape. That metallic screech is about to burst my head open. Just half an hour ago, this place was quiet. When the sandstorm started, the world turned a hazy yellow, and the wind slapped against the tin roofs with a rhythmic patter. We were holed up inside, worrying because the supply truck was late again, and dinner would probably be cold bread. Old Jean was fiddling with his gun, wiping the barrel over and over with a rag, the metallic clinks echoing loudly in the room. Suddenly, all the sensors on the wall went dark, one by one, as if someone had cut the power. No one fired a shot, and there was no thunderous explosion outside. Just a dull, rhythmic thumping sound, thump, 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 seeming to come from underground. I saw the water cup on the mess table start to shake, the water rippling outward in circles, the frequency getting faster. The captain frowned and looked outside, telling me to check the outer wall. I stepped out into the wind and sand, the grains stinging my face. As I approached the blast wall, I stopped in my tracks. On that concrete wall, there were now neat, circular grooves, like spiral marks left by a giant drill bit. The grooves were deep, and cement dust was oozing out along the cracks. The captain thought it might be an enemy excavator tearing down the wall from outside. He yelled for us to grab the heavy weapons and deal with it. We scrambled up the watchtower, the searchlight beam swaying through the dust. Squinting, I saw a massive black shadow in the sand, slowly crawling along the base of the wall. It looked like a snake, but it was incredibly thick, seeming even fatter than our base's tank. It pressed its drill-like head firmly against the wall, and sparks started flying from the entire structure, with lime dust spraying everywhere. I swallowed hard and fired the first shot. The bullet struck the monster's back with pinpoint accuracy, but it didn't penetrate at all. Hitting its rusted iron-like hide, the bullet sparked a bright red flash before ricocheting into the air. The monster didn't even flinch from the impact. It just kept rotating its head, drilling into the thick concrete wall as if it were tofu. I watched the segments of its body contract and expand with each movement, shaking the ground beneath us. That's when I realized the thing had no eyes, just a dark, hollow pit at the center of its head, aimed directly at the heart of our base. The blast wall finally gave way. With a deafening, bone-rattling thud, 3 meters of solid concrete crumbled, scattering rubble everywhere like a downpour of gray rain. The noise was so immense it felt like a freight train had plowed straight into our barracks. Then, the massive, mucus-covered drill head surged forward, engulfing the entire front courtyard of the base in a cloud of dust. I stood less than 20 meters away, watching helplessly as the monster rammed into the guard post. The sturdy wooden frame and bulletproof glass shattered like tissue paper, collapsing into a heap of splinters with a sickening crack. The 3 soldiers inside didn't even have time to scream. They were gone in an instant, only their helmets left spinning and clattering on the concrete. As the beast fully emerged into the base courtyard, I finally saw its full form. Its elongated body slithered rapidly across the ground, its rusted, segmented plates grinding harshly against the asphalt with every forward thrust. The once smooth road surface was torn apart by its hard scales, sending rocks flying in all directions. It moved with terrifying speed, nothing like a worm, more like a runaway industrial drill. "Open fire! Now!" the captain screamed from the watchtower. Gripping my rifle, I emptied my magazine into the creature's fleshy bulk. The muzzle flash illuminated the swirling dust around us. Bullets rattled against the monster's back with a sharp, metallic clang. I could see clearly, each round sparked against its hide, leaving not even a scratch. Its armor was too thick, too hard. Every shot ricocheted wildly, some even pinging off nearby steel fuel drums. The air filled with the relentless chatter of machine guns. Everyone was pouring fire into the creature, but it paid no heed. With a violent twist, it swung its bone-bladed head sideways, plowing straight into a row of sleeping tents. The heavy canvas structures were instantly shredded, their contents, cots, uniforms, soldiers' belongings, sucked into the whirling drill. I watched sturdy steel poles twist like pretzels or snap into pieces. One soldier tried to run. He'd barely taken a few steps when the monster's long body swept sideways, too fast to dodge. The heavy segmented plates caught him, hurling him over a dozen meters through the air. He slammed into a concrete bunker behind us and slid down, motionless. His rifle lay on the ground, crushed under the creature's bulk with a sickening crunch. The monster looked even more terrifying now. Its head kept rotating, bone plates grinding together with a sound that set teeth on edge. The barrage seemed to have enraged it. Its originally grayish body began flushing red. It coiled back, then lunged forward with explosive force, slamming straight into a jeep parked by the roadside. The jeep weighed at least 2 tons, but to the monster, it was a toy. The spinning drill bit into the engine compartment with a screech of tearing metal. The hood exploded into fragments, fan blades, batteries, and shrapnel flying everywhere. The vehicle was shoved backward, leaving black tire marks on the concrete before flipping over with a deafening crash. I kept reloading magazines, my fingers numb from the strain. Old Jean was crouched behind sandbags not far from me, clutching a high-powered machine gun. Shell casings rained from the barrel. But no matter how much we fired, the monster continued rampaging through the compound. Every time its massive body turned, it swept aside everything in its path. I watched as it turned its slime and dirt-caked head toward our water tank, a huge iron container. The creature lunged upward, its spinning, serrated blades screeching against the metal. Water gushed from the ruptured tank, churning the dust on the ground into mud. Mist filled the air, mingling with the swirling sand until we could barely see ahead or behind. The feeling was indescribable. We held weapons we'd always believed were formidable, yet hitting this monster felt like scratching an itch. Its segmented carapace flexed open and shut, grinding stones on the ground into powder. The stench of dead fish it carried grew stronger, making me nauseous. I watched it churn through the base, overturning every brick, cracks spreading across the ground. Its enormous body slid past just meters away, the heavy friction making the earth tremble beneath my feet. I could see where its plates joined, a patch of pale, quivering soft flesh, the only part that didn't look rock hard. But it was too small, and the creature moved too fast to aim at. 2 more men tried rushing from the side to throw grenades, but the monster's tail whipped around, hurling a slab of concrete that smashed them against the barricade. I couldn't worry about the others anymore. I scrambled backward. The monsters had spun faster, the high-frequency whine threatening to split my skull. It targeted another row of barracks where people were still trapped. I saw it press its drill-like head against the wall, and the whole building began to shudder. Corrugated iron sheets flew from the roof one after another, and the concrete walls crumbled like ice in hot water under the creature's rotation. Then, the thing that had shredded the barracks suddenly went still. The deafening drill noise cut out, leaving an eerie silence across the base, broken only by the wind whistling through torn metal. I stopped retreating, gasping for air, my throat coated in dry concrete dust. I looked over. The monster was half-sprawled over a collapsed signal tower, its massive spiral head retracted into its carapace. It quivered there, only a tail like a large pipe visible outside. The segmented tail twitched occasionally, scattering debris with a clatter. The captain's hushed voice carried from a distance, waving for us to hold fire. He said the thing might be stunned from the earlier rocket hit, or maybe its head was jammed in the tangled rebar. Everyone huddled behind whatever cover remained, eyes fixed on the crater. I edged forward slowly, trying to get a clearer look. The monster's carapace appeared incredibly tough, but as it curled up, I noticed a glistening fluid dripping from the joints. Where it fell on the scorching asphalt, faint white smoke rose, intensifying the dead fish odor in the air. Old Jean crawled up beside me and whispered that the creature must be exhausted. The captain started assigning tasks, ordering a few men to bring over the large anti-tank mines. The plan was to slip explosives into the gaps in its armor, while it was immobilized, and finish it off. It seemed like our best chance. After all our bullets had been useless. I hunched low, inching toward the creature. I noticed the puddles on the ground trembling slightly, not from the wind, but with a rhythmic upward pulsing. Pressing my ear against a broken section of wall, I felt a faint hum in the bricks, like countless tiny drills boring underground. That's when I saw it. Thin red filaments had sprouted from the tip of the monster's exposed tail. They writhed like living things, threading through cracks in the rubble. I glanced down at my boots and saw one of those fine red threads slowly emerging from a fissure beside my foot. I stepped back quickly, a knot of unease tightening in my chest. The fire in the base was still burning, its light reflecting off the monster's carapace with a cold, greenish glow. It remained motionless, crouched there like a massive heap of scrap metal. The squad leader had already led his men to within 5 meters of it, carrying heavy boxes as they crept forward, hunched low. The silence around us was so profound that we could hear everyone's heavy breathing. The sandstorm had eased slightly, and the moon peeked through a gap in the clouds, illuminating the ruins. I kept my eyes fixed on the enormous creature, watching as more and more viscous fluid dripped from the seams of its carapace, staining the rocks beneath black. The subterranean hum seemed to grow slightly louder, and the ground beneath my feet felt increasingly unstable, no longer solid, but like stepping on a thin, brittle shell. The men carrying the explosives were almost upon the monster, and the soil beneath their feet was crumbling bit by bit into the pit. The explosives team reached the tail of the massive creature. The squad leader crouched ahead, signaling for them to wedge the boxes into the seams of the carapace. Just then, the ground beneath my feet shuddered, a strange, deep tremor, as if something far below had coughed violently. I saw the soil beneath the men suddenly crack open, spreading with terrifying speed like black lightning streaking across the ground. Before they could react, large sections of the earth gave way. What had been solid ground transformed in an instant into a bottomless black abyss. One of the men carrying a box lost his footing and plunged downward. He reached out to grab a nearby rock, but it too tumbled into the void. Just as he was about to fall, a second massive drill head emerged from the depths. This one was even paler than the first, coated in more slime, as if freshly pulled from a vat of oil. It burst diagonally from the earth, slamming into the man. He didn't even make a sound before being dragged deep into the soil by the immense rotational force. The explosives box in his hands shredded into a cloud of wooden splinters. Almost immediately, a third drill head erupted from beneath the concrete near the mess hall. That area had been occupied by an 18-ton Striker armored vehicle, the heaviest piece of hardware in our base. The drill head pressed upward against the vehicle's undercarriage, and I heard the piercing screech of metal being twisted. The striker, originally positioned to block a breach in the wall, now looked like a crushed tin can, its midsection bulging upward violently. I watched as the thick steel plates of the armored vehicle were grazed by the rotating bone-like blades and then sliced clean through. It was like cutting lard with a hot knife, no resistance at all. The striker's 8 massive wheels flipped skyward, and the instrument panels and components inside shattered, raining down through the gaping holes. These parts struck the spinning drill head and were flung in all directions, creating a metallic downpour. The monster that had been lying motionless on the signal tower suddenly sprang to life. Its previously exposed tail retracted sharply, and its entire body uncoiled like a spring. Its funnel-shaped mouth gaped wide, the 7 layers of serrated blades within spinning madly, emitting a noise 10 times louder than before. It slammed into a nearby supply truck, splitting the vehicle in half instantly. Cans and water bottles inside the cargo hold were pulverized, sending a mist of white water and multicolored packaging flying everywhere. The 3 monsters roamed wildly across the base courtyard, churning up the underground soil. I realized that wherever they passed, the ground would collapse in large sections. The seemingly stable sandbag emplacements now slid helplessly into the deep pits below. The squad leader frantically waved us toward the only concrete main building. As I ran, I glanced back and saw old Zhang still crouched in a distant sandpit. Smoke began to rise from beneath his feet, grayish-white limestone dust spraying from cracks in the ground. The low wall behind him was sinking inch by inch. I shouted old Zhang's name, but he couldn't hear me. Then, another new drill head burst from the ground beside him. It spun so rapidly that the displaced soil buried half of his body. I saw old Zhang desperately striking the rounded carapace with his rifle, but the barrel bent on impact, sparks flying into his face. The drill head tilted sideways, grinding the sandbag pile where he had taken cover into dust. The sand poured into the chasm like a waterfall. The overturned armored vehicle was still smoldering. One of the monsters crawled over and coiled its body around it. The sound of crushing metal made my teeth ache. The armored vehicle's engine was still running, emitting thick black smoke. The monster was toying with it like a soda can, squeezing the machine that weighed over 10 tons until it groaned and creaked. The doors were crushed and flung off, slamming heavily into the nearby wire fence. I kept running, but the ground beneath my feet felt increasingly unstable. I noticed the soil was no longer its original color. Everywhere was covered in a shiny, fishy-smelling mucus. The slime made the ground treacherously slippery, and I nearly fell several times. Something even stranger happened. From the collapsed sinkholes, thin red filaments began to emerge. They spread rapidly, quickly entangling abandoned wooden beams and steel bars. Anything caught by these red threads soon began to tremble before being dragged underground by some unseen force. I saw a discarded medical kit ensnared by the threads. Within seconds, it was pulled into the mud. Over at the base's fuel depot, another disaster unfolded. A monster had burrowed straight through the base of a fuel tank. Barrels of diesel gushed out, meeting the still-burning flames and erupting into a towering inferno. The monster charged right through the fire, its carapace glowing red-hot, trailing the stench of scorched flesh. Carrying that wave of heat, it slammed into the base's command center. The building's foundation gave way under the impact, causing the entire structure to tilt. I watched as all the second-floor windows shattered, glass shards glittering in the firelight as they fell like the base's tears. I saw the captain and the remaining few soldiers rush through the main building's entrance. I couldn't worry about old Zhang anymore. I just lowered my head and sprinted forward. The chaos behind me grew louder, the screech of grinding metal, the sound of armored vehicles breaking apart, and the muffled, earth-shaking drilling from underground. Each noise hammered home the truth: this base was beyond saving. As I leaped onto the main building steps, I glanced back. The once-level courtyard had transformed into a pitted, fiery quagmire. The 3 massive drill heads surfaced and vanished among the craters like giant fish churning in water, waiting to devour whatever remained. When I burst through the main building's entrance, the entire structure felt like it was shuddering. This wasn't ordinary shaking. It was the sensation of the foundation being hollowed out, the whole concrete building sinking into the ground. A comrade behind me had just stepped onto the stairs when the concrete slab beneath his feet shattered. He plunged into a deep pit billowing white smoke, desperately clawing at the exposed rebar at the edge, his fingernails tearing off as he screamed with an inhuman sound. I dashed into the first floor corridor to find complete chaos. Old Zhang had somehow caught up, but he was acting completely off. He'd discarded his empty rifle and was huddled in a corner, violently banging his head against the concrete wall. Thud, thud, thud. Each impact left a new bruise on his forehead, yet he seemed to feel no pain. He kept muttering over and over, "It's useless, they won't die, all metal, all metal." At the end of the corridor, a door burst open as several soldiers stumbled out. One of them was wildly swinging a broken wooden stick at the air. Spotting me, he suddenly raised the stick and smashed it against a nearby fire hydrant. Glass shattered everywhere, and his hand was cut in several places, but he kept swinging until the stick broke into pieces. This kind of physical domination could truly drive a person mad. Our sturdiest blast walls and thickest armored vehicles were like paper against those drill heads. I watched as the corridor floor began to bulge upward, tiles exploding one after another. That grinding, turning sound now echoed from within the walls themselves, like 1,000 giant nails scraping against my eardrums at once. I tried to pull old Zhang away, but he shoved me back with terrifying strength. He started grabbing shards of glass from the floor, slashing them across his own arm while letting out a hollow, demented chuckle. Seeing him like that, I had to turn away. Just then, I noticed the fuel depot outside the window had exploded completely, flooding the corridor with blinding light. The red-hot monster was scaling the main building's exterior wall, its segmented carapace scraping against the concrete and sending a shower of sparks cascading downward. I stood in the middle of the corridor, watching the wall plaster flake off bit by bit. It was a terrible feeling. The most powerful thing in your hands meant nothing to them. I saw the concrete walls of the command center crumble like sandcastles before that monster. With just a touch of its spinning head, a huge chunk of the wall vanished. That's when I noticed something. The monster wreaking havoc outside seemed to be drawn to loud noises. When that guy smashed the fire hydrant earlier, the floor nearby immediately bulged. And when old Zhang was banging against the wall, the big drill outside the corridor was already creeping along the base of the wall toward us. These things followed vibrations. Whoever made the most noise, they'd come for them. I remembered the heavy bulldozer parked not far away. Its engine was as big as an ox, and it had been left running for the cellar repairs. I glanced at the large pit in the center of the main building, originally intended for the cellar. To reinforce it, 3 thick layers of steel mesh had been laid down in advance, but the concrete hadn't been poured yet. Now it was just a trap full of iron spikes. I had to make a decision. I looked down at my hands, sweaty enough to soak the grip of my gun. I threw the gun to the ground, and the clang of metal against the floor made the monster outside pause for a moment. Ignoring old Zhang and the others shouting and screaming, I hunched over and climbed out through the corridor window. The sandstorm outside hadn't let up, but I could see black smoke still billowing from the bulldozer's exhaust pipe. The slime on the ground made the path treacherously slippery, and I nearly fell into the bottomless pits several times. I could feel the buzzing from underground right beneath my feet, a frequency that made my throat taste metallic. As I rushed toward the bulldozer, I saw a massive drill rising from the wreckage of a truck, turning in my direction. I scrambled up into the high cab of the bulldozer, using both hands and feet. I could feel the giant had locked onto me. The sand on the ground began flowing in one direction, a sign it was charging through the soil. I took a deep breath and gripped the thick throttle lever. I didn't think about what would happen next or about my fallen comrades. Staring ahead at the pit full of steel mesh, my palms slick with sweat, I yanked the throttle back hard. The bulldozer's engine roared with a deafening growl. Black smoke spewed from the exhaust pipe, shaking the entire seat. In the dead silence of the ruined base, the sound was like a blaring horn. I saw the 3 drills, wreaking havoc in different areas, all stop almost simultaneously. Their grayish-white, slime-covered bodies shuddered violently in the firelight before turning toward me, emitting high-pitched shrieks. I knew I'd succeeded. They were all coming for me now. The three tunnel drill-like monsters plowed 3 deep furrows in the ground, moving as fast as if they were flying. I kept my eyes fixed on the steel mesh pit, pressing the clutch to the floor. I felt the iron beast beneath me shaking violently, the ground tremors caused by the approaching monsters. The lead monster's funnel-shaped mouth was almost touching the bulldozer's steel blade. The wind from its spinning nearly knocked my helmet off. At that moment, I stopped thinking altogether. I just gripped the control lever tightly, waiting for them to charge into that trap full of iron hooks. The feeling of hanging by a thread made my whole body tremble, but I didn't let go. The screeching of metal surrounded me completely, and I could even see the fine patterns on the monster's armored shell. I held the bulldozer's gear in place, and the entire machine roared forward. The massive steel blade scooped up clumps of mud and rocks, sparks flying from its edges. Less than 10 meters ahead, the thickest drill burst from the ground, its body twisting into a strange arc midair before slamming into the bulldozer's front. A deafening crash. The bulldozer's thick steel plate was instantly dented. The monster's spinning head struck the center of the blade, the sound of metal grinding enough to shatter eardrums. I watched as the blade twisted and deformed under the bone-like plates, the solid cast iron curling into spirals. The bulldozer's engine began to sputter, choking as black smoke gushed from the exhaust pipe into my face. I didn't let go, stomping the accelerator with all my might. The creature also went berserk, its long segmented body writhing violently on the ground, churning up soil into the air. I could see the glowing mucus oozing from the gaps in its armored shell, splashing onto the overheated engine casing with a hiss, sending up plumes of white smoke. Just then, the other 2 drill heads closed in from both sides. The one on the left moved lightning fast, skimming the ground before plunging straight into the bulldozer's tracks. Those heavy metal treads, designed for climbing mountains, were instantly mangled by its massive head. Dozens of metal hooks snapped like twigs, sending shrapnel flying like bullets. The bulldozer lurched violently to the left, nearly throwing me from the cab. Through the chaos, I spotted the captain and the remaining team at the main building's window, clutching explosives. I didn't have time to shout. The drill head on the right had already leaped. Its jagged maw clamped onto the bulldozer's roof, tearing through the metal like paper. Huge sheets of twisted steel dangled above me. With a yank on the controls, I sent the bulldozer, now swarmed with monsters, plunging into the pit on sheer momentum. The pit was lined with dense steel reinforcement mesh, a jungle of spikes waiting below. The front wheels dropped first, then the entire machine toppled. The lead drill head tumbled in after us, its massive body crashing onto the rebar with a sickening crunch. Though each bar was only finger-thick, their sheer number pierced through the gaps in its armor. The creature thrashed wildly, twisting the surrounding rebar into knots. Some bars snapped, but most ensnared it completely. Its weighty body convulsed, collapsing the pit walls as chunks of earth rained down. Before the bulldozer fully overturned, I grabbed a handhold and scrambled out sideways, landing on a pile of sandbags, dazed. Before I could stand, a deafening metallic roar erupted from the pit. All 3 creatures had fallen in, their spinning heads grinding against each other's shells, sparking crimson flares. "Now! Throw them now!" I screamed toward the main building. Thermobaric grenades rained down, landing squarely in the pit. I dove behind a crumbling wall as, boom! The first explosion sent a fireball soaring meters high. The blast wave knocked me flat. More detonations followed, shaking the ground so hard my teeth rattled. Glancing back, I saw the pit consumed by white smoke and red flames. The bulldozer's fuel tank blew, lighting up the area like daylight. The creature's body twisted in the inferno, its hardened shell cracking under the heat like firecrackers. It wasn't dead yet. Its charred head still struggled toward the pit's edge, grinding the concrete perimeter into dust, spraying rubble like a geyser. Several layers of its 7-tiered bone drill were blown off, the remnants still spinning grotesquely. The captain and his team charged forward, pouring gunfire into the pit. Bullets finally pierced the superheated armor, spraying grayish mucus that ignited on contact. The largest creature let out a guttural groan, its body stiffening before slamming onto the shattered rebar. Its crimson tendrils, now charred, hung limp like burned rope. Nearby wrecked trucks and shipping containers, their foundations gone, slid into the fiery pit. Tons of scrap metal crushed the creatures beneath, punctuated by the sound of crumpling metal and one final, nails on chalkboard screech. The flames raged on, baking the surrounding sand into blackened clumps. The three drill heads lay motionless at last, their colossal forms trapped under rebar, bulldozer, and wreckage, smoldering in ruin. I lay on the ground, gasping for air, watching the thick black smoke billow into the sky. Half of the base's command center had collapsed, and sparks flew from severed wires everywhere. I glanced down. My sleeve was completely burned away, my arm covered in ash, but I didn't even have the strength to lift a hand. Old John emerged slowly from the wreckage, clutching his bent rifle, looking like a man who had lost his soul. He walked to the edge of the pit, peered down, then slumped to the ground, burying his face in his hands. I stared at the massive crater. The flames inside were slowly dimming, leaving only twisted sheets of metal creaking in the wind. The monsters were finally buried in the trap we had dug ourselves, and that spine-chilling whirring sound had finally stopped. I looked up at the stormy sky, where sand still fell relentlessly, covering the gnawed walls and shattered vehicle husks. In this wasteland, the only sounds left were our ragged breaths. I sat there, watching the flames in the pit dwindle. The wind howled on, spreading a fine layer of yellow sand over the blackened carapaces. The captain staggered over and pulled me up. My legs barely obeyed, and as I stood, my foot slipped. I looked down. I had stepped on a large, jagged piece of bone, blown clear by the explosion. It was about the size of a palm, its edges sharper than a razor, still smeared with a thick grayish slime. We retreated toward the landing pad at the rear of the base. Passing the crater again, I saw the bulldozer had burned down to a skeletal frame, a thick steel rod spearing through the monster's ruined skull, pinning it to the pit's bottom. The red tendrils on the ground had all charred into clumps of black ash, scattering with the wind. I examined my hands. My fingernails were caked with marble-like dust, and the back of my hand was crisscrossed with cuts from flying debris. The wounds weren't bleeding much, but they were caked with white powder. Old John walked ahead, his left sleeve torn away, the skin on his shoulder scraped raw, exposing red, glistening flesh. He didn't speak, just stared blankly at the path ahead. The base's walls were barely standing. I spotted the crushed armored vehicle, now slumped in a pile of dirt, a foul, fishy liquid seeping from the cracked door. The ground was riddled with deep fissures, some still emitting faint wisps of white smoke. A helicopter landed on the rubble-strewn clearing. The rotor's violent gusts sent paper scraps and splinters flying everywhere. We climbed into the cabin one by one, none of us looking back. Sitting on the cabin floor, I felt the faint vibrations beneath me. Through the window, the once large outpost now looked like a mud pit churned by a giant shovel. Smoke still rose from the monster's grave. Amid the haze, I saw a partially burned segment of segmented carapace shift in the wind before tumbling into a deeper crevice. The helicopter ascended, and the sandstorm swallowed the craters once more. The cabin door sealed shut,